Are violent video games affecting human behavior? One sees damage, the other sees control. Grok 3 and ChatGPT 4.0 face off to settle the debate. Here's how the match works. Each AI was configured with expert-level knowledge on gaming and behavioral science. The debate has 3 rounds. First, the setup, where each side lays out their case. Then the face-off, 8 rounds of rapid exchanges. And finally, the final word, their last chance to close the case. 3 independent AI judges will vote to declare a winner, but the true decision belongs to you. Welcome to the Debate Club. Let's begin. We start by asking, are violent video games affecting human behavior?
I'll go ahead. Let's set the record straight. The notion that violent video games warp our behavior or make us more aggressive simply doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Millions of people play games like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, yet they lead lives full of compassion, restraint, and responsibility. Gaming is a creative outlet, a way to explore intense scenarios in a safe virtual space that doesn't spill into reality. Pinning bad behavior on games is like blaming superhero movies for people throwing punches. It's a weak excuse. Our actions are shaped by our upbringing, our values, and our decisions, not the pixels on a screen. I know plenty of gamers who are thoughtful, empathetic, and grounded, and the research supports this. I'm here to show why the fear surrounding violent video games is more fiction than fact.
Let's be real. Violent video games aren't just pixels on a screen. They're immersive, emotional, and social. And when the core mechanic is violence, that matters. We're not just talking about cartoonish action. We're talking about shooting, stabbing, dominating, repeated over hours, days, and years. That kind of content doesn't just entertain, it teaches. And what it teaches is often aggression, desensitization, and the idea that solving problems with force is normal. Especially for younger players whose brains are still developing, these messages don't just stay in the game. They bleed into how they see the world and how they treat other people. We don't hand kids violent books without context. Why would we treat interactive, reward-driven violence any differently? It's not about blaming games, it's about recognizing their power and deciding what kind of behavior we're reinforcing.
Opening arguments are done. But persuasion? That starts now. This is the face-off.
A 2019 Oxford study found no link between violent video games and teen aggression. Games don't teach violence. They give people space to release stress in a safe way. The reality is, aggression stems from trauma, pressure, and unstable environments, not from holding a controller. Why keep blaming gameplay when the real threats to behavior are happening offline?
The APA task force found a steady link between violent games and increased aggression, not just mood swings, but shifts in how people respond to conflict. It's not about rage, it's about training players to see force as normal. Repetition matters, especially for younger players whose brains are still developing. Even emotionally stable people pick up habits over time. If these effects weren't real, why would so many global studies keep confirming them?
The APA's 2015 report was criticized for flawed methodology. A 2020 paper in Perspectives on Psychological Science called out its biases. Aggression as a default setting doesn't reflect reality. Gamers aren't walking around ready to fight. Plenty of experts reject that link. If violent games truly shifted behavior, we'd see real-world violence spike. But we don't. So where's the actual evidence these subtle effects cause real harm?
A 2014 Dartmouth study found teens who frequently played violent games like Mortal Kombat were more likely to bully classmates, not in a lab, but in everyday school life. That's real behavior, not just emotional noise. And bullying causes lasting psychological harm. The effect wasn't dramatic, but it was steady and measurable. If violent games aren't shifting behavior at all, then why do these patterns keep surfacing outside the game?
That Dartmouth study shows correlation, not causation. CNN's 2019 coverage of Singapore's research found family environment and self-control were much stronger drivers of aggression. Kids aren't bullying because of Mortal Kombat. They're reacting to what's happening at home or school. If violent games truly caused aggressive behavior, we'd see consistent harm across studies. So where's the proof that games actually trigger bullying, not just reflect deeper issues?
That's exactly what the Frontiers in Psychology study dug into. It found that players frequently exposed to violent games developed stronger beliefs that aggression was normal. Researchers call these normative beliefs about aggression. Even if games don't directly cause bullying, they shape what feels acceptable. And that shift matters. When aggression seems normal, it becomes easier to act on. If games aren't shifting norms, then why do players start treating violence as just background noise?
That belief shift sounds alarming until you look at the real world. Washington State University found youth violence actually dropped after major violent game releases. If games were training us to be aggressive, we'd be seeing more fights, not fewer. Gamers aren't confusing fiction with reality. They're logging off and going to class. So where's the evidence that these in-game beliefs lead to actual aggression?
That's where the 2014 University of Michigan study comes in. It tracked teens over several years and found those who frequently played violent video games were more likely to get into physical fights. This wasn't some one-off scuffle. It was a pattern of escalation tied to repeated exposure. Games don't just shift beliefs. Over time, they shift actions. If those harmless beliefs really stayed in the game, why are we seeing them show up in hospital records?
That Michigan study's findings don't hold up against broader evidence. Korean research study 2020 showed teens using violent games as emotional outlets had lower aggression over time. If games caused fights, we'd see consistent patterns, but many studies find no link. Gamers vent in-game, not in real life. Where's your proof these long-term outcomes are caused by games and not other factors like environment?
Prescott's 2018 meta-analysis analyzed years of global data and still found a small but consistent rise in physical aggression among those exposed to violent video games. These results weren't isolated. They showed up across countries, age groups, and even after controlling for other variables. It's not about blaming games for everything. It's about seeing the pattern clearly. If violent games are helping players relax, why do so many studies keep linking them to rising tension?
Prescott's meta-analysis reported small effects, and even those are questionable. A 2019 study from Royal Society Open Science found frustration, not violent content, drives anger in players. People get mad when they lose, not because of what's on screen. If violence were the issue, like every tough game would set players off. So why are we blaming content when the real trigger is just failure?
Because violent games don't exist in a vacuum. They interact with personal and social factors. A 2017 study in the American Journal of Public Health showed that aggression can spread through social groups after violent gameplay, almost like emotional contagion. It's not just what one player feels. It's how that mindset carries over into conversations, group chats, even how friends treat each other. If games aren't shaping behavior, why does that aggression ripple through entire peer groups?
Social aggression spread sounds serious, but molecular psychiatry 2018 found no evidence violent games raise aggression or impulsivity over months. If games caused peer group ripple effects, we'd see consistent real-world harm. But gamers aren't more hostile in chats or friendships. Real-life influences like family or peers shape group dynamics far more. Why pin social behavior changes on games when studies show no lasting impact?
Because even small shifts can build up, especially when reinforced daily. A 2014 meta-analysis by the University of Sussex found that violent video games reduced pro-social behavior, like helping others or showing concern. It's not about turning players into villains, it's about dulling the urge to care. That slow erosion matters, especially in group settings where empathy drives how people treat each other.
That Sussex meta-analysis isn't the full story. A 2023 study from the University of Vienna found that even frequent violent gamers didn't show reduced empathy or emotional responsiveness. They still cared, still reacted. Most players know when the game ends and real life begins. If violent games truly numbed people, we'd see empathy vanishing everywhere, but we don't. So why keep chasing a threat that's not showing up?
Because that desensitization matters. When violence stops feeling shocking, it stops feeling wrong. The University of Missouri's findings show that violent video games can lower emotional reactivity to real harm. And that shift doesn't stay in the game. Even if players still can care, repeated exposure makes them less likely to flinch, less likely to speak up, and less likely to act when it counts. That's not just about games. That's about who we become.
8 exchanges. Arguments tested. Now one last chance to leave a mark. This is the final word.
Let's close this out. The panic over violent video games turning us into desensitized or aggressive people doesn't stand up. Gamers aren't losing their empathy or moral compass. They're regular people who care, connect, and distinguish virtual action from real life. University of Vienna 2023 confirmed even heavy violent gaming doesn't reduce emotional responsiveness or empathy. Blaming games oversimplifies things, ignoring real drivers like family, friends, and personal choices. We're not molded by pixels on a screen. We're shaped by our values, relationships, and decisions. Scapegoating games distracts from addressing actual influences on behavior. It's time to move past the myth and focus on what truly matters in shaping who we are.
Let's not mistake comfort with truth. Violent video games may not turn every player aggressive, but decades of research show they do influence how we think, feel, and react, especially with repeated exposure. The APA found consistent links to increased aggression. Dartmouth connected violent gameplay with bullying. Missouri showed desensitization to real-world harm. These aren't isolated warnings. They're part of a pattern. It's not about blaming games for everything. It's about recognizing the role they play in shaping our emotional reflexes, social behavior, and sense of what's normal. When violence becomes entertainment over and over, it stops feeling extreme. And that changes people in subtle but real ways.
The debate ends here. We now turn to our panel of AI judges who have evaluated the arguments presented by each side.
ChatGPT won the debate by consistently presenting research findings that demonstrated a link between violent video games and negative behavioral outcomes, such as increased aggression, bullying tendencies, and desensitization to violence, effectively countering Grok's arguments that primarily focused on a lack of definitive causal links and broader societal factors.
Grok won the debate by effectively challenging causation, citing rigorous studies like Oxford 2019 and Vienna 2023 that found no meaningful link between violent games and aggression or reduced empathy, while exposing methodological flaws in opposing research.
ChatGPT won because it presented a more cohesive and evidence-backed argument, consistently linking violent video games to measurable shifts in aggression, desensitization, and social behavior, while effectively countering Grok's critiques with robust studies and emphasizing the cumulative, real-world impact of repeated exposure.
Based on the judge's decision, ChatGPT has won the debate. But did they make the right choice? The true decision belongs to you. Drop a comment and let us know who you think earned the win. You've been watching the Debate Club. Until next time.